Matt Schaff and Jared Smola of DraftSharks.com here to preview Week 13 of the fantasy football season. And Jared, probably the biggest story of Week 13 is a guy that we just lost a couple days ago, Jonathan Taylor. Thumb surgery, expected to miss 2 to 3 games. We'll see exactly when he returns, but that means Zack Moss really comes back into our lives. And just to kind of start putting this in perspective, for the season, Jonathan Taylor is averaging 14.4 PPR points per game. Zack Moss is still at 13.5, despite taking a clear backseat in that backfield over the past 3 games as Jonathan Taylor took over the lead. Before that, Zack Moss is averaging even more PPR points per game than Taylor, 17.6 up until that point. That'd be RB6 right now. So what do we do with Zack Moss this week and next?
Yeah, I mean, Zack Moss's role early in the season was better than anything Jonathan Taylor was getting since he returned, right? Because JT was still ceding some work to Zack Moss. Zack Moss, those 3 weeks, weeks 2, 3, and 4, played 85% of the Colts offensive snaps, got 22, 33, and 19 opportunities. He finished 2 of those weeks as a top 10 fantasy running back. He does get, a tough on-paper matchup this week against Tennessee, but he smoked Tennessee in week 5. That first game Jonathan Taylor returned. If you remember, Zack Moss still remained like the clear lead guy in that game. 23 carries, 165 yards, 2 touchdowns. I still respect Tennessee's run defense. I don't think it's an ideal matchup for Moss. I don't. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I don't know how you don't play the guy based on the volume you think he's going to get. Shane Steichen, by the way, said earlier this week too. He basically confirmed that Zack Moss is going to step back into this workhorse role without JT, which we all expected because the only other option on the team now is Trey Sermon.
We'll get to Kyren Williams in a bit, but Zack Moss might be the single most surprising thing of this fantasy season. Like that, Zack Moss at any point would be no, you can't sit Zack Moss player. It's tough to get over, but like you said, that first meeting with Tennessee was his biggest game of the season so far. So it doesn't mean he's going to necessarily deliver this time. And Tennessee is back up to second in rush defense DVOA, but you have to start him at this point. We know he's dominating the backfield. We know it worked out last time. Easy start this week. Probably an even easier start next week against the Bengals in week 14. Yeah. And then we'll see where Jonathan Taylor's at.
Yeah, for sure. We can roll it into Travis Etienne now because he gets the Bengals this week, taking your job again and doing the transitions, not as well as you do. But Travis Etienne gets this Bengals defense, which just made the Steelers look good, has people excited about the Steelers offense, which, we'll get to them later as well. But I think they're relatively strong offensive output last week was just as much to do with this Bengals defense as the Steelers, new look offense. But Cincinnati, for Etienne specifically, 29th in run defense DVOA, 18th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs, allowing 5.0 yards per carry. That's second worst in the NFL. The reason I like this matchup for Etienne as well is the Bengals have allowed the third highest rate of 15-plus yard runs. That's kind of where they've struggled, is giving up these explosive runs. And we kind of know that's what Travis Etienne's game is built on. So it's been a rough stretch for Etienne. He stopped scoring touchdowns. The efficiency has not been good. But I think this is an awesome bounce back spot at home for Cincinnati. The Bengals are 8.5-point favorites. Jake Browning is not going to put up a fight here. So there should be positive game script. And I think, Etienne should get 20-plus touches in this game.
Yeah, I don't think you really have to make a case for Travis Etienne starting for pretty much anybody this week. The matchup's terrific. His usage has been terrific all season. This probably wouldn't even have made the rundown for the show, but I got on our Discord a question from somebody saying, why is DS so high on Travis Etienne this week? He's sitting second in our PPR rankings at running back. And I mean, rather than just give him the answer, I was like, I'll take this to the guy who's actually driving our projections and see exactly why Travis Etienne's so high this week. And really, it's the matchup. I don't think these Bengals have a chance of actually keeping up with Jacksonville. So the Jags should be able to run the ball as much as they want to in this one. My one question on that front is how much these Jags want to run the ball right now. Trevor Lawrence is healthier. Travis Etienne's had a long season with a lot of touches, and his playing time has come down over the past 3 weeks, not to like a worrisome degree, probably to a better degree for him sustaining his health and productivity the rest of the way. But it's at least worth noting he's been down below 70% snap share in each of the past 3 games after being up above 80 for a lot of the season. Hasn't really meant a big difference in touches. I'm not expecting them to give a significant amount of his work to Dearness Johnson, but it's one of the slight negatives that it's really more of a worth noting negative because he's so high in scoring and ranking week. And I think beyond this week, there are other things to be aware of that are negatives for Etienne. He has run well this year, and you can tell that by the number of missed tackles he's forcing. Only Christian McCaffrey has forced more on runs than Travis Etienne this year. The Jacksonville offensive line has been horrible, though, and it is limiting Etienne's efficiency. You wouldn't know it because of how many touches he gets every week, but Jacksonville's 30th in adjusted line yards, 31st in PFF run blocking grade, and now they lose left tackle Cam Robinson, who has not graded well as a run blocker this year, but his backup's not likely to be better than he is. Travis Etienne's also 34th among 46 qualifying running backs in rush yards over expected. He's 33rd in yards after contact per attempt among 60 running backs with 40 plus carries. He's also tied for just 19th in expected rushing touchdowns. Jared, that number surprised me the most because he's done well with touchdowns, 5th in actual rushing TDs. You look at the offense, it's been going well. You just think, he's as good a bet for a touchdown as anybody. Tied for 19th means he hasn't gotten as many opportunities near the goal line as some other running backs. And that offensive line is going to continue holding him back if he does get opportunities in that range going forward.
Yeah, he went in that touchdown binge like in the middle of the season, and again, it's kind of got cold in that department. So we've already kind of seen the regression hit in terms of the touchdown scoring. He is still getting pretty much all the work near the goal line. I think even last week he had multiple chances from near the goal line, wasn't able to score in any of those. So again, we're kind of seeing that regression hit already. Again, to me this week it's about the matchup. It's about a guy who is a pretty good bet for 20 plus touches as a big home favorite. I do think all those things you mentioned are definitely a concern for Etienne beyond this week, where the schedule gets quite a bit tougher. Cleveland, Baltimore, Tampa Bay the following 3 weeks. Etienne does get Carolina, which is one of the best running back matchups in week 17. So if you get to your fantasy championship with Etienne, he could definitely help you win it. But I do think we're probably looking at a guy who's going to be ranked, closer to the bottom of RB1 territory for these next 3 weeks.
Travis Etienne is one of the players that we highlighted in our final trade targets article of the season that posted Wednesday night on draftsharks.com. And you can check that out for more of really what makes him a potential sell if your trade deadline has not passed yet. I'd say Travis Etienne's even a potential dynasty sell at this point. Again, that depends some on what you're trying to do this year, and it always depends on what you're getting back. He's not somebody that I think is going to crash, but I think there's a chance that maybe Travis Etienne going forward either doesn't get quite as much work as he did this year, and that brings the production down, or his perceived ability might be inflated a bit by how much work he's getting and that, scoring touchdowns above expected in the middle of the season. It's at least somebody that I'm looking at and thinking, maybe I trade Travis Etienne for multiple, team building pieces that can help me longer term than what Travis Etienne might do next year for me.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I think that makes sense.
We will have a new dynasty trade targets on the way on draftsharks.com with tips on trading for rookie picks if you're out of contention, who to send those picks away for if you're chasing a title this season. Herms also has his latest dynasty spotlight focused on some more general strategy tips. You want to check that one out for how to look at your league and determine player trade values. And of course, our trade navigator is always ready. It includes the trade calculator to make sure that you're making the right moves. It'll let you know the roster impact, both the rest of this year and beyond for your dynasty leagues. Let's move on now, Jared, to Jordan Love, who 3 weeks ago, I guess probably less than that, was somebody that I would prefer to make fun of rather than start. And now maybe it's time to flip that. Should we believe in Jordan Love and his wide receivers going forward?
Yeah, maybe. He's been really good the last 4 weeks now. 65% completion rate, 8 yards per attempt, 8 touchdowns versus 2 interceptions. I mean, we're still talking about a guy who's made, I believe, fewer than like a season's worth of NFL starts. So definitely leave the light on for Love. I think at this point, he's done enough to be the Packers starter next season. I mean, they're not going to have a top 5 pick in the draft. They're not going to be able to get one of these elite quarterback prospects. I think it's more likely than not that Love gets another crack. So that's something to, think about for dynasty as well, especially super flex leagues. I think, Love has plenty of value there. For this week in particular, I believe in the Chiefs pass defense more than I believe in Jordan Love. The Chiefs are 3rd in pass yards allowed, 3rd in yards per pass attempt allowed, 3rd in pass defense DVOA. They're 7th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. They're 8th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. So I think there are spots the rest of the way where Love could be, a quarterback one spot starter, or at least an option. I don't think this week is one of them. And then the wide receivers we'll see. I mean, I think, Jaden Reed and Christian Watson right now do sit in like wide receiver 3 range in our rankings. I want to see about Dontavian Wicks. I think he does matter to these guys. He, of course, missed that Thanksgiving game. And we saw Christian Watson set a season high in route rate. We saw Jaden Reed post his second highest route rate of the season. I do think Dontavian Wicks being out was a big part of that. Wicks did put in a limited practice on Wednesday. He's off the injury report with his concussion, so he's cleared concussion protocol. It's just a knee issue now that has some iffy for this game, so we'll see about that. But again, I think this is a game you'll probably see a step back from the Packers passing game in particular. I wouldn't panic if that's the case. Again, I think it's just going to be this Chiefs pass defense is just really good.
Yeah, I'm not willing to bet on the Packers passing game in this matchup, but we do have 6 teams on bye. You won't find any of those guys ranked high, but you just mentioned the wide receivers are potentially in play. Jordan Love might be in play depending on what else you have going on at quarterback. And I will say I'm at least open to the possibility that the Packers will be fine in what's been a tough matchup. A couple weeks ago, I'd have said avoid Jordan Love in this spot. I'm at least now willing to say, man, maybe he works out okay. Like you alluded to, I'm much more interested in Jordan Love and his wideouts next week at the Giants, the week after that against the Bucs. Those are really the 2 spots that I think will tell us if we can use any of them over the final 2 fantasy weeks, because week 16, they're at the Panthers. And, we've been saying all season, that's not a defense that should scare you, but I mean, it's late in the season and they're the 5th worst scoring matchup for quarterbacks. They're the 2nd worst scoring matchup for wide receivers. They played the Cowboys recently and limited that passing game in scoring. So it's a matchup to take seriously, and we'll see over these next 3 weeks how usable the Packers are. And then week 17 at the Vikings is an interesting one that I think we'll have to wait until later to really judge, because that Vikings defense has gotten better lately. So I think for both the Packers offense and Vikings D, we'll have to see over these next 3 weeks before we know what to do.
Yeah, sure. That Vikings game is at least in Minnesota, so no weather concerns there would be nice. I do think the Giants matchup and the Bucs matchup, especially week 15, is an excellent spot for the Packers passing game.
And I will say it's probably going to be easier to bet on either Christian Watson or Jaden Reed at the wide receiver 3-4 level than it will be to trust Jordan Love as, the guy at quarterback for you.
For sure. Agreed.
Jordan Love is highlighted, however, among this week's Dynasty Risers and Fallers on DraftSharks.com. So you can check out that quick hitting article just to see guys that have moved up or down our Dynasty rankings recently. The Steelers offense looks like one that might be moving guys up or down the Dynasty rankings. Let's hope for up. But let's see if we have them inflated after that 1 week. You got to it a little bit talking about the Bengals matchup. Yeah. Tell us more about what happened with the Steelers offense in that first game after they fired Matt Canada.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard the stat by now, but 421 yards of total offense for the Steelers last week, which they did not get to 400 total yards of offense in any of Matt Canada's 45 games, which I hadn't realized. That's an amazing stat, because 400 yards, like it's nice, but it's not like, it's incredible.
Not magical
performance. They did it 0 times out of 45 games with Matt Canada, which is insane. So, I mean, this is definitely an upgrade, right? I mean, I think, again, I do think the Bengals defense was a lot of this, but I do think it's likely the Pittsburgh's offense is going to be better going forward than it was under Canada. This was still, though, a slow-paced, run-heavy offense. The Steelers last week, just in week 12, were 25th in neutral pass rate, and they were 28th in pace, in seconds per play. So they were playing slow. They were leaning on the run. That's obviously good news for Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. And their usage did not really change much in this first game under the new offensive coordinators. You still had Najee Harris lead the way with 15 carries to Jaylen Warren's 13. You had Jaylen Warren out target Najee Harris 3-0. So I still think, these guys are kind of in their roles. They're kind of got to, split stuff down the middle for the most part. But again, in this run heavy offense at this point, I think, both Harris and Warren are looking like RB2, RB3 types that you can use on a weekly basis. Still not super excited about the passing game. I think Pat Freiermuth is obviously the big question here, the big topic here after his just massive game out of nowhere. It's another case where I think the Bengals defense had a lot to do with it, right? Because the Bengals are now dead last in adjusted fantasy points allowed to tight ends. They're 30th in tight end coverage DVOA. Pat Freiermuth even said after the game that, like, they kind of game plan for him to be a big part of this attack because of this Bengals defense and kind of the way they cover. We'll see on Freiermuth. I mean, this is a guy who he finished tight end 13 and tight end 7 in his first 2 NFL seasons in PPR points. So it's not like this guy came out of nowhere. It's not like he's a good player. I'm still skeptical though that he's going to be like a guy we can count on as a weekly fantasy starter, just because this is going to, still be a pretty slow paced run heavy offense with a couple wide receivers who are still going to demand targets. So Freiermuth does sit in tight end 1 territory in our rankings this week. I think a lot of that is because there's 6 teams on bye. It's a solid matchup for Freiermuth. The Cardinals have not been bad against tight ends, but it's just a bad defense in general. So there's potential for the Steelers offense to be pretty productive again this week.
I think it's a big win for Pat Freiermuth that he could at least be game planned for in this, that they threw over the middle of the field, which they have not done nearly enough until getting rid of the failed play caller that they just did. They did take advantage of a Bengals defense that's weak and young at safety. The Cardinals aren't good at much on defense, but they are much more experienced at safety. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's a less good game for Pat Freiermuth here. But you mentioned he's already in tight end 1 territory. It's a big win because before last weekend, I wasn't sure that Pat Freiermuth would matter the rest of this fantasy season. He at least matters now. And it doesn't take a whole lot to get into tight end 1 territory at a time when we're deciding every week whether we should start Logan Thomas or Dalton Schultz. So Pat Freiermuth should be on a roster in most leagues. At this point, he is at least within the weekly starter conversation, and we'll see exactly what the offense has. It was certainly plenty matchup against Cincinnati, which was already meh on defense and is actually trending down by the numbers over the past 3 weeks. It was also just the 4th best overall weekly offensive DVOA rating for the Steelers this season. 3rd best DVO rating for the pass offense, which is really what we were looking for the most. Kenny Pickett's 2nd best single game passing yardage total of his career so far, tied for his 2nd best single game completion rate, 3rd best yards per attempt, 2nd best passer rating, and the 2nd best PFF passing grade in the league for week 12. So undeniably positive. We'll see where they go from here. We'll try to make sure that we don't overrate anything that happened in that individual game.
It was also one of Pickett's bigger average depth of throw games of the season, 8.2 yards versus season-long average of 7.3 yards. So we did see some more downfield throwing, which we like. So again, Steelers offense trending up. I like it more. I just don't want to overrate it, especially on the passing side, because I don't think you're going to get big passing volume out of this offense going forward.
Just like Pat Freiermuth, we weren't sure it was going to matter the rest of the way. Now it looks like it can at least matter the rest of the way. On the other side of that one was the Bengals, who I'm not sure that they're going to matter on offense. And I think, Jared, the biggest question is how it affects Jamar Chase, because I'm not sure how many other Bengals we're truly interested in. I mean, Joe Mixon's going to be in the mix just because he's the backfield leader and he's going to get touches and you're going to have to decide. He's obviously taken a big hit with the offense downgrading at quarterback, but Jamar Chase is the bigger question. And I think both where we rank him and where the market ranks him this week suggests that people don't want to be too pessimistic on him. I wonder, though, if we should be more pessimistic than we are at the moment.
It was mostly bad for Chase last week, a little good. So I'll start with the one good thing, which really surprised me. The Bengals were still 2nd in pass rate over expected last week in the NFL. So I don't know if Zach Taylor didn't realize yet that he still doesn't, he doesn't have Joe Burrow or what. I would not be going that pass heavy with Jake Browning, but they did, which is, obviously good news for Jamar Chase. Now, the bad, Jake Browning was as bad as expected. He was 31st in PFF passing grade for the week. The other problem here for Jamar Chase, he saw 6 targets last week for a 23% target share. Even if you go back to week 11, when Jake Browning, entered for Joe Burrow, Chase saw just 21% of Browning's targets in that game. 23% target. It's not a horrible number, but you want Jamar Chase up at 30%, which is where he was with Joe Burrow. And if I'm Jake Browning, I'm targeting Jamar Chase on, a third of my passes if I can help it at all. So that needs to change. If Chase is only going to be getting, target shares in the low 20s from Jake Browning, he's going to struggle for, more than wide receiver 3 value, I think. I mean, again, I keep comparing this to the Garrett Wilson situation, because I think it's similar, right? Super talented wide receivers playing with bad quarterbacks. At least Garrett Wilson is getting 30% target shares every week, is getting double-digit targets every week. If Jamar Chase can, do that, he can survive as a wide receiver too. But if the target shares don't improve, again, I think he's going to be more like a wide receiver 3 the rest of the way.
I've always been skeptical of Zack Taylor. I remain skeptical of Zack Taylor. Like, if you have a first-time quarterback in there and you keep throwing the ball, wouldn't you be thinking we got to design a bunch of these plays for Jamar Chase, especially with T. Higgins out? I mean, it's Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, and a bunch of dudes that don't exist in reality. Trenton Irwin and Charlie Jones and other made-up characters. Like, how do you not throw 30+% of your passes toward Jamar Chase? Unless he's triple covered on every play, which should leave somebody open somewhere else. Jake Browning, if you look at the traditional numbers, he completed 73% of his passes for 8.7 yards per attempt. It looked like he's okay if you go by those numbers. He lucked out on one long pass to Jamar Chase because it was a tipped ball short that Chase got and took 31 yards downfield. So that boosted everybody's numbers. Overall, Browning had a 5.6 yard ADOT, which is not only down from Joe Burrow's season number, but down further versus Joe Burrow's most recent games before his injury. So we get a worse quarterback, we get shorter passes, and we get not enough target share going to the clear lead guy on offense. I think it all adds up to make me want to get rid of Chase if I can right now for anything really that's helpful, especially because I'm not worried about what I might miss out on if Chase ends up being okay. I think his upside case is that he's Garrett Wilson the rest of the way. Garrett Wilson's not winning anybody a fantasy championship this year.
Yeah, I will say the schedule is going to help Chase for the most part here. Jacksonville, Indianapolis, Minnesota, Pittsburgh, his next 4, 3 of those games, Jacksonville, Minnesota, and Pittsburgh, are green matchups on our strength of schedule page, which means, they're top 10 wide receiver matchups. Indianapolis is kind of a neutral matchup, but it's definitely, not a scary secondary. So the next 4 spots are good for Chase. He does get Kansas City in week 17, which is a horrible spot. We've seen L'Jarius Sneed shut down a bunch of big name wide receivers this season. I'm sure he'll be in shadow coverage on Chase in that game. So week 17 is going to be a problem, but these next 4 matchups at least will definitely benefit Chase.
Matchups might be a problem for Kyren Williams the rest of the way, but Jared, he came off IR looking like a must-start stud, somebody that's almost has to be in your lineup. Obviously, it depends on who else you have. I'm sure there are some teams out there that can afford to sit Kyren Williams at times, but you highlighted him in your usage takeaways article. He got the work that he was getting before, including a season high tying 6 catches. And that's the particular stat that I think can guard him against tough spots against Cleveland and Baltimore these next 2 games.
Yeah, the receiving production has been up and down for Kyren Williams, and I think Cooper Kupp's health has had a lot to do with that. Kyren had some big pass catching games early in the season before Kupp returned. Last week, Kupp played in air quotes, but he tweaked his other ankle. He hurt his other ankle on his first catch of the game and then just did not look like himself the rest of the way. So I think that helped Kyren's pass catching stuff. But that's really just a bonus. We know he's going to get the rushing stuff at this point. Kyren's playing time was actually down a bit from where it was early in the season. He was also pulled though for the final 8 minutes of that game last week. So, it was a blowout win for the Cardinals. Prior to that, you had Kyren get 16 of the 28 running back carries. So, the carry split between Kyren Williams and Royce Freeman was not as close as the final numbers make it look. Kyren obviously, finished RB1 on the week last week. He has now finished as a top 4 PPR running back in 4 of his last 6 games now. So, the dude is just crushing. I'm not sure how you could bench him, like you said, unless you're totally stacked at running back, even in these tough matchups the next 2 weeks against Cleveland and Baltimore. I think he's, going to be a, lower end RB1. He still has positive matchups against Washington in week 15. He gets the Giants in week 17. So, Kyren Williams could be a fantasy championship winner, which, would have sounded crazy 4 months ago, but, that's where we are at this point.
What a time to be alive. And I'm especially not worried about him against Cleveland because I don't think the Browns can score enough to take the running game out of that one. So they can just give Kyren Williams the ball, even if he's averaging 3.1 per carry in that one. Surprisingly, given who the players are here, the wide receivers are the bigger question mark. The passing game is the question mark with the Rams. And that's because Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua have not been giving us numbers lately. Matthew Stafford rebounded. in this last game, gave us 4 touchdown passes, none of them to those wideouts, 2 to Tyler Higbee. Cooper Kupp is clearly not at full strength. He put in a full practice Wednesday. You mentioned he tweaked an ankle last time out. So it's not like we have to worry about him not playing or anything, but he's clearly short of full strength. And then one other factor on his front, Matt Harmon tweeted this out. The percentage of Cooper Kupp targets that have come on designed plays, like plays that are meant to target Cooper Kupp, the percentage of his targets that have come on those plays in 2021, it was 12.3%. 2022, it was 23.7%. This year, it's 4.2%. So the Rams aren't trying as hard to get Cooper Kupp the ball. That's one of the issues. Another is him not being fully healthy. And, combined, it's just not anywhere close to the Cooper Kupp we got over the previous 2 years.
Yeah, and I would assume Harmon's numbers are omitting the games Kupp missed. But that again speaks to I don't think he's healthy. Because I think if Cooper Kupp's healthy, the Rams are going to design plays to get the ball in his hand, even if the number maybe declines a little bit because the emergence of Puka Nacua and because the emergence of Kyren Williams. I still don't think it'd be 4% if Cooper Kupp was healthy. But at this point, Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp are losing you fantasy games. Puka Nacua has finished outside the top 50 wide receivers in PPR points in 4 of his last 6 games. Cooper Kupp has been wide receiver 49 or worse in 5 straight games. Part of this, and we've talked about this in the past, is the Rams just going run heavy, surprisingly. Last week, the Rams threw on just 50% of their passes. They're at a 52% pass rate since week 6, which is right near the bottom of the league. Matt Stafford averaging just 29.5 pass attempts per game over that span. So there's just not a ton to go around. And then you have Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua's efficiency is just way down. For Kupp, it's down versus what he did over the previous 2 seasons. I mean, from 2021 to 2022, Kupp caught 76% of his targets at 9.5 yards per target. This year, he's at a 53% catch rate and just 7.7 yards per target. And then even Puka Nacua, I think he's been hindered by some injuries too. He's been on the injury report with shoulder and knee issues over the past month or so. You look at his efficiency, Puka Nacua, 9.1 yards per target over the first 5 games of this season, just 7.3 yards per target over the last 6. So I think injuries and pass volume declining has really hurt both of these wideouts.
Yeah, to me, they're both in wide receiver 3 territory, not anybody that I'm excited about. And the whole situation makes Matthew Stafford less attractive. Like I said, he's coming off the 4 touchdown passes. I'm going to look at the passing yardage for that one, as well as his production before that, more than the 4 TD passes, as well as playing against Arizona.
Yep.
And he's not somebody that's really factoring in for me going forward. Deeper league, maybe he is, but certainly not somebody that I'm trying to start.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about Stafford as a positive touchdown regression candidate, and it hit that 1 week. I wouldn't expect that type of touchdown production going forward.
Week 14 streaming defenses. We're talking about going forward. We're not just looking at this week, but beyond. If you want to get in front of your league and pick up next week's good streaming defense, Jared, who is it?
Yeah, this continues to be one of the easiest seasons ever, I think, for streaming defense, because there's just so many bad quarterbacks out there. You just pick up the defense starting one of these crappy quarterbacks. So we get the Packers against Tommy DeVito, who, again, played pretty well last week. They still scored just 10 points. DeVito took another 6 sacks against the Patriots last week. He's at a 21% sack rate on the season. 1 out of every 5 times DeVito drops back, it results in a sack. So I think the Packers are in play. The Texans get whatever quarterback the Jets are throwing out there next week. So I think they're a decent enough option. And then the Colts get Jake Browning. So I think, those are kind of the 3 okay defenses that are going to be solid week 14 spots there, just because of the quarterbacks they're facing.
Yep. And Green Bay is rostered in only 16% of Yahoo leagues right now. Houston is rostered in only 12% of Yahoo leagues at the moment. So if you do want to get ahead, go ahead and grab either of those. They are probably available in your league. And this is the time of year, as we said before, that you can go ahead and drop somebody on your bench that's not likely to help you the rest of the way and stash that second defense. If you have one that you don't want to play next week, it doesn't mean go ahead and play them ahead of your good performing defense, whose matchup is fine next week. So certainly use your judgment on whether to pick up a different one and who to play in any given week.
Yeah. And know your league too, because if you go to your waiver wire every week and you see like 3 or 4 solid streaming defenses available, maybe you don't need to use that second bench spot for a defense. But if you're in a tighter league where more of these defenses are owned and the waiver wire is more barren, then I agree. It's definitely worth stashing that second defense at this point.
Yeah, and if all three, Packers, Texans, and Colts are available, then, there's less pressure for you to go grab any one of them right now. For more streaming defense options for this week and the week ahead, you can head to draftsharks.com. You can see not only our week 13 rankings, but our week 14 rankings are already available as well. And of course, the free agent finder syncs directly to your league, so it can tell who is specifically available to you, compare those players with what's already on your roster, and, just signal what you need to go after, whether it's at defense or any other position of need. DS Insiders know and will tell you that we are 100% focused on trying to help you not only win this week, but win your season.